Yo, what's up? These are horror movies based off real life events, part 1. Wes Craven's film Nightmare on Elm Street. The true story starts out in Cambodia when a family escaped the killing fields and their son was suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder when they reached the US, and he claimed that when he went to sleep, somebody was trying to chase him and kill him. The young man told his parents that if he went to sleep, he felt like somebody was going to kill him, so he stayed awake for days at a time hoping that he wouldn't fall asleep. But his parents ended up giving him sleeping pills, which basically just set him on a silver platter, waiting for this person to kill him. The boy had finally fallen asleep one night, and the parents thought that it was all over. But at midnight that night, they heard screaming coming from his room, and once they got here, the boy was already dead. After his death, forensic couldn't even figure out how this boy died, but the whole time he was claiming that someone was chasing him in his dream, but his parents didn't really believe him. Sound familiar? Let's hope you don't encounter a killer in your dreams.
Horror movies based on true events, Part 4. Child's Play released in 1988. This film is said to be based on the haunted object, Robert the Doll. According to the legend, Robert has supernatural abilities that allow him to move, change facial expressions, and make giggling sounds. He originally belonged to Robert Eugene Otto, and some versions of the story say that Otto received the doll as a gift as a retaliation for wrongdoing. In 1994, the doll was donated to the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida, and it became a popular tourist attraction. People have reported that he has caused car accidents, broken bones, job loss, divorce, and a bunch of other misfortunes. And the museum visitors also say that they have experienced post-visit misfortunes for failing to respect Robert.
Horror movies based on true events, Part 1. The Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Loosely based on Ed Gein, aka the Butcher of Plainsfield, a convicted murderer and body snatcher. His crimes spanned from 1954 to 1957. He stole female body parts, keeping them in his fridge and even wearing them. In November of 1957, police found the headless and gutted body of Bernice Worden at Gein's farmhouse, as well as a collection of human skulls and a suit made of body parts and skin. Not only was Ed Gein the inspiration behind the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, but also Silence of the Lambs and Psycho. If you enjoyed this video, please like and follow for more.
Halloween horror movies based on real-life events, and warning, this might scare you. Part 2. The movie It was actually based off the real-life events of a clown killer from Illinois. He would take the lives of 33 men, women, and children. In the 70s, people weren't actually afraid of clowns, so the clown killer would make jokes, be friendly, and lure the people into his car. Sadly, anyone who got into his car would never be seen from again. John Wayne Gacy was the man responsible for these heinous crimes. He would be thrown in jail to rot till the end of his time. Stephen King would base his novel Pennywise and the movie It off these events. The only difference in the movie It was the clown lured the kids into the sewer. Don't forget to share this story with a friend.
Horror movies based on true events, Part 7. The Conjuring released on July 19, 2013. In 1971, the Perron family moved into their dream home in Rhode Island. Right away, strange things began to happen, such as the broom would be in a different place and the girls' toys would be moved as well. Remember the clap game from this movie? They actually did this in real life. Instead of the mom being confronted by the entity, Cindy, one of the daughters, went to hide in their woodshed, more specifically a wood storage box. She would end up trapped in there until her sisters found her. Bathsheba is said to be the evil entity that tormented the family, including the house smelling like rotten flesh and physical attacks against the mother, Carolyn. The Warrens investigated this and performed a seance, some argue an exorcism, and during this, Carolyn was said to become possessed. The Perrons eventually moved out 9 years later, but paranormal activity still remains.
Did you know that the horror movie The Orphan was based off a real-life event? In 2009, the film The Orphan was released, and it was about a couple who adopted a young girl who wasn't exactly who she said she was. You see, this whole time, this couple thought that they adopted a 13-year-old girl, when really, they took in a 33-year-old woman with a hormone disorder, and the whole time, she was acting as if she was a young girl. You see, but what if I told you that this story actually was based off a 33-year-old woman who posed as a 13-year-old boy in Russia who was adopted, and eventually was joined with another family where she caused havoc. You see, she actually convinced these two sisters to allow her to come live with them, and well, one of the sisters had a disorder in which she was very easily manipulated. See, the girl posing as an orphan actually convinced the sister with a disorder to lock her children in the basement and deprive them of food and keep them locked down there in a cage. The mother of the children actually got arrested, but the orphan made it out.
Horror movies inspired by true events, Part 6. The first Annabelle film released in 2014 with 2 sequels releasing in 2017 and 2019. The story goes, a student nurse was given the doll in 1970. They said the doll behaved strangely and that a psychic medium told the students that the doll was inhabited by a spirit of a deceased girl named Annabelle. They tried to accept and nurture the spirit-possessed doll, but she reportedly exhibited malicious and frightening behaviors. At this point, the Warrens were first contacted, moving the doll to their museum after pronouncing it demonically possessed. Annabelle remains at the Warren Occult Museum in Monroe, Connecticut. Movies based on true events, Part 10. The Haunting in Connecticut released in March of 2009. The film is based on the Snedeker family. It's super controversial, so wait till the end and let me know if you think it's a haunt or a hoax. In 1986, the family relocated to Southington, Connecticut from New York. Their son Philip was battling cancer, so they wanted to be closer to his treatment facility there. The mother of the family, named Carmen, said she experienced paranormal activity right away, including her mop water turning into blood and something even worse. Carmen, her husband Alan, and their niece Kelly, who lived with them, would report that they had been sexually assaulted by a demon. Eventually, the Warrens would get involved with this case and investigate for 9.5 weeks. The biggest reason they fall under scrutiny is because their story is ever-changing. One instance includes an author who's supposed to be writing a novel on their story when he noticed this as well. When he told Ed Warren this, his response was, "Oh, they're crazy. You've got some of the story. Just use what works and make the rest up. Just make it up and make it scary." Horror movies based on true events, Part 9. The original When a Stranger Calls released on October 26, 1979. This is partially based on the urban legend of the babysitter and the man upstairs. This dates back to the 1960s about a teenage girl babysitting kids who receive a phone call from a stalker who continuously asks her to check the children. But it also has a true crime aspect as well. In March of 1950, 13-year-old Janet Chrisman was babysitting for the Romack family. Things were going well until 10:35 p.m. that night when a 911 call would come in. On the call, they heard a woman screaming in sheer panic and say, "Come quick." Then the call would drop and no one would ever call back. At 1:35 a.m., the Romacks returned home and they found Janet sprawled out on the living room floor in a pool of blood. She had been violently assaulted and murdered. The weird thing was, though, the little boy she was babysitting was asleep safe in his bed. To this day, this case remains unsolved.
One of the creepiest places on earth is the Stanley Hotel. There has been so many ghost sightings here that even paranormal investigators cannot explain it. Like the one in this picture that was taken randomly. Do you see it yet? It almost looks like a little girl with really long hair. Oh wait, don't forget to send this to a friend that you would want to go there with.
In this house on November 13th, 1974, Ronald DeFeo Jr. murdered his entire family one by one while they were sleeping with a rifle. Ronald confessed and was sentenced to 25 life sentences. About a year later, the Lutz family moved into the house and moved out after only 28 days. George Lutz said he would wake up around 3 a.m. every morning, and that's around the time that Ronald murdered his family. He also reported seeing his family levitating from their beds. They experienced cold spots and strange odors. They had a priest come and cleanse the house, and he claims to have heard somebody yell, "Get out." Some of you may recognize this house from the movie The Amityville Horror. The house still stands in Long Island, New York, and I'm hoping to plan a trip there eventually. Would you go?
Horror movies based on true events, Part 3. The film Girl Next Door was released in 2007. It is based on Jack Ketchum's novel with the same name, and it was inspired by true events, the story of Sylvia Likens. In June of 1965, Sylvia's mother had been arrested for shoplifting, and her father Lester had decided to send her over to a woman named Gertrude's house for boarding. While there, she was held captive and subjected to increased levels of abuse and extreme torture over a period of almost 3 months by her caregiver Gertrude, Gertrude's children, and several other neighborhood children. Sadly, she would pass away from her injuries due to the abuse on October 26th of that year.
Horror movies that became true after their release. 2 years after Scream was released on January 1998, 16-year-old Mario Padilla and his 14-year-old cousin Samuel Ramirez became famous for the Scream murder. While using a voice changer and wearing Ghostface costumes, they held down Mario's mother and stabbed her 45 times. They were arrested for murder and admitted that they were trying to copy the Scream movie after watching it. In 2009, 2 teenagers planned to copy the Saw movie but with real people. They planned to have 3 victims, a police officer and 2 young girls. They even had detailed plans for puzzles and games for the victims to learn lessons. Also, they set up cameras to film the murders just like the movie. Fortunately, their mother overheard them talking about it and reported them to the police.
Jennifer's Body, which stars Megan Fox and released in 2009. This is inspired by the Elise Pollard case of Arroyo Grande, California. She went missing in March of 1996. 8 months later, her body would be discovered stabbed to death in the woods. This had been done by 3 friends who were part of a death metal band, and they said they sacrificed her because they wanted fame.
Horror movies based on true events. Open Water. On January 25th, 1998, Tom and Eileen Lonergan joined 26 other passengers to dive into the Great Barrier Reef. Upon arrival, all passengers put on their diving gear and explored the Coral Sea. This would be the last known sighting of Tom and Eileen Lonergan. For the couple, the day would take a tragic turn when they resurfaced and were surrounded by nothing but clear blue water, abandoned by the boat that brought them. 2 days passed before they were discovered missing when the tour guide, Jeffrey Nairn, found a bag with their personal belongings left on the boat. The search for Tom and Eileen Lonergan began and went on for 3 days, in which time their diving gear was found along with a diving slate that read, "To anyone who can help us, we have been abandoned on Agincourt Reef, 25 January 1998, 3 p.m. Please help us, come to rescue us before we die. Help." But the bodies of Tom and Eileen were never found. Please like and follow for more.